Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So, the next book in the Dame Frevisse medieval mystery series is The Bishop's Tale. And this book is, in its way, it's a return to a more lighthearted... Not that this is one of those super lighthearted series. This isn't like the Cat Who books where, you know, nearly everything in it is fun. These are much more hardcore realistic, so there's a lot of sad stuff, but this one is a definite shift towards a certain amount of a certain reduction in just like the horror. You start to be able to put behind you the horror of the servant's tale at this point. It starts with tragedy in its way, yes, because it opens with Frevisse's uncle, Thomas Chaucer, and he's on his deathbed, and he's talking to his friend, the titular bishop, Bishop Beaufort, and the thing is that the conversation that they have, it's affecting and sweet, and they're very, very good friends. And at the end of it, Thomas Chaucer, partway through it, he requests that Bishop Beaufort make sure that a specific book that Thomas has laid aside for Frevisse is given to her. But he very specifically insists that the bishop not look in it, because if he looks at the book, then he will have to confiscate it. Because you see, what it is an English translation of the Bible, if I'm recalling correctly. The thing is that at this point in time, in the 1400s, that there was a time when it was in fact not done. It was considered illegal. It was considered wrong to translate the Bible from the Latin Vulgate into, to translate it into English, into the vernacular. This is, after all, one of the big changes that was wrought by the Reformation, by Martin Luther and others, was this notion that your holy book should be in a language that you understand, so that you can read your holy book and understand what is in your holy book, rather than letting a priest tell you, because, let's be honest, if you can't read your own holy book, your priest could be telling you anything. Your priest could say, you must dance the mazurka and pay me money while you do it, and that is how you get into heaven, and you will do it because you don't know any better, because you can't read the holy book. So, it's a big deal, and so giving Frevisse, who is not merely somebody but a woman, because as we know, women are poor, frail creatures who don't know what's best for them and need to be led, that actually comes up later in this book, funnily enough, that Frevisse could not have this book, and so Thomas has to give it to her effectively on the sly. He has to make sure that everybody has plausible deniability when it comes to that. Later on in the book, Chaucer, the household priest, and Frevisse are sharing a moment, and the priest is sort of checking, did you get that Wycliffe translation? And she's like, I don't know, I haven't opened the package. And he's like, well, then I don't know where it is, and you don't know if you have it, so we're just both going to honestly at the moment say that neither of us knows. Because if anybody asks, I don't actually know where it is, because you haven't said anything and you don't know that you have it. Everybody's very complicit in this little bit of tomfoolery to, let her have this thing that her uncle is leaving her. Actually, this is a very bookish book, in its way, because, of course, you have these repeated moments when Frevisse, she goes to the library, to her uncle's library, because she has to do some research into poisons at one point in this book. It turns out not to be a poison, but an allergy, but, of course, nobody knew about what allergies were back then, so, actually, Margaret Frazer has an interesting discussion at the end, like an interesting author's note at the end of this book, just about the exigencies and requirements of research for doing this, because when you look these things up, you have to, if you're going to talk about allergies in the 15th century, you have to know what they called allergies back then, because they didn't call them that. Anyways, but you have these moments where at the start of this book, Chaucer is talking to Bishop Beaufort about how, I have left you all of the good books. My son-in-law doesn't really care about books except based on how many jewels are in the cover and how much gold leaf there is in the book. That is, his son-in-law doesn't care about books as objects that have information in them. He cares about books as, how much could I sell this for? And it's a very, very, it's a reader's sort of conversation. It's a conversation about people who love books because we love what's in the book, not because we care that our bookshelves all have matching leather covers, or that we have made sure that this is the shelf of red books. It's a fundamental perplexity that those of us who are readers and who love books for what is written in them, not for, like the Book of Kells is gorgeous. It is art. It, needs to be looked at and remembered as a work of beautiful visual art, but a Bible, the value of a Bible lies in the words written in it. And whether you are approaching it from a religious and devotional perspective, or you are approaching it from a perspective that the King James Bible is a remarkable work of prose and poetry, as a work of writing, as a work of literature, not as a work of religious text, either way, the value lies in what's written, not in the gold leaf. That said, of course, the value of the Kells lies in the decoration as much as anything else, as most of those gorgeous medieval illustrated books are. But, you have that, and then later in the book, Frevisse, she has to go and do some research, and she invites her fellow nun, because, of course, a woman, even less so a nun, cannot travel alone, and so Dame Perpetua has come with her, and Frevisse asks, Perpetua, would you like to come with me to the library and help me do some research? And Dame Perpetua is just like, oh my god, yes, this is the best thing ever. Look at this library. Oh, library, so many books. And, Dame Frevisse, she goes there and remembers how important that library was to her, how important the books were to her, that this was something that she shared with her uncle, but it's also the joy that she just has in reading and learning and just looking at the written word and all of these things. And, takes this moment out during the course of things to just look at a book that her uncle had only just received or was just in the process of getting translated, and, just gets lost in it. And we find later on that Dame Perpetua has done research and then cheerfully lost herself in a book because she has found what Frevisse needed, and then went off and, started reading something really, really interesting because there are books there. And Frevisse also, with the household, with her uncle's priest, also just shares several moments of regard on the topic of books. and even has a moment with her cousin, because we meet her cousin Alice, who will come back several times. Alice, who has married a duke, who has married one of the great powers of the kingdom, but who also winds up saying, I used to envy you connecting with my father, in all of these books, and I went to my father and finally demanded my own access to these books, and it's a moment of regard between these two women about how Alice, too, is an intelligent woman who likes to read, who likes to understand the world, who does not want to be ignored. And we also do get a lovely moment of, I suppose you could call it a sort of a women's lib thing, where near the end of the book, Dame Frevisse is talking to Bishop Beaufort, and Bishop Beaufort basically pulls "Oh, you did real well for a woman," and she just looks at him, and he abruptly realizes she will not accept my compliment because "for a woman" has been appended to it. She knows she did well, and she didn't do well for a woman, she did well. And when he says, what, you don't believe that women are meant to be subordinate to men? And she says, listen, I know that God made woman to be man's handmaiden, but in the thing that you're referencing, he says that women are physically weaker and emotionally weaker, but that their minds, their intellects, are the equal of any man. And also, she adds, God, having made Eve second, made her the best. And basically, she trumps Bishop Beaufort and says, look, you don't get to sneer at me, you don't get to pretend that I'm dumb. I realize that my position is such that I can't, I cannot be your equal, but you don't get to pretend that just because I am not your equal, that doesn't mean that I'm dumber than you. It just means that I know my place, but that doesn't mean my place also involves me being dumb. And it's delightful because it's something that Frevisse just rams straight into over and over and over again. This, you're a woman and a nun, why don't you know your place? And her stance is, I know my place. That doesn't mean that I'm stupid. So it's really, really great for that. And so I enjoy this one because we get a lot of that bookish feeling. We get a lot of that regard between Frevisse and other people that she meets there. And also, one of the greatest things in this, the victim is a bad person, and nobody likes him. And everybody is glad that he's dead, because his being dead is basically good for everybody except him. Like, the only person for whom it might possibly be bad still has an advantage out of it, because at least it means he no longer has to put up with Clement, or Clement, whichever. Because Sir Clement is a Class A jerk. And actually the big setup in this is that he's a Class A jerk who goes around saying, "May God strike me down if I lie." And the person who murders him cheerfully takes advantage of that, saying he's going to say it at some point, and when he does, I will kill him, and in that moment, it'll look like God did it, because God knows we've all been waiting for him to do it for the last, however many, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Anyways, I have miraculously managed to mostly avoid spoiling people by not actually telling you who did it. And I guess I will do you all the kindness of not telling you. So I think that's all I'm going to say about this book, and I will see you all next week.